As we continue our journey through the configuration and management of our Office 365 services, the next area I want to focus on is OneDrive for Business. So what I want to do here is look at how we can configure and manage OneDrive for Business. And for you to be as efficient as possible with that, you need to be familiar with a few different items here. So what I want to first do is drill into OneDrive for Business implementation. And as you can see, I also use OD4B as a shortcut for OneDrive for Business. I also want to take a look at OneDrive for Business components so you understand all the different pieces that make up OneDrive for Business. We'll then look at how we configure OneDrive for Business. And like most of the other services, we have two ways. We have PowerShell and we also have the GUI. So we'll take a look at both of those as well. In the event that you've walked away for a little while and don't remember what OneDrive for Business is all about, here's an explanation and definition of what OneDrive for Business is all about. Now, in order for our users to be able to use OneDrive for Business, we need to know what this has to offer. So what I want to do is take a look at the OneDrive for Business implementation. One of the first things I'm going to need to do is migrate my current files to OneDrive. How can I do that? Well, we have a couple options. The first one is called Known Folder Move. I can move or redirect the folders to OneDrive for Business. And this will make my important folders and files available in OneDrive for Business from any of my devices. What do I mean by important folders? Well, my desktop folder, my pictures folder, my documents folder, anything along those lines that I use quite frequently. Another option for me to migrate my content is to use good old drag and drop. Yeah, I can open up OneDrive for Business and File Explorer, open up my file share in File Explorer, and drag and drop those babies from my file share into OneDrive for Business. So that's another way we can do that. Now, we have to be concerned about securing these files as well. And a way for securing files is to set up folder protection from within OneDrive, and I can choose which folders I want to protect. I can later change the protection of files. I can also change the file types that are protected. PST files and .1 files are examples of file types that are protected. And similar to SharePoint, I can share documents or lists or libraries of content from within OneDrive for Business. This allows me to create more of a personal workspace, but also get feedback and information and input from others. Maybe if I'm trying to polish up a document before I send it out, I can invite someone to work on that document with me. Now, we also want to be aware of monitoring OneDrive file options. So I can actually create alerts on my documents from within the OneDrive for Business interface. But as an admin, I may be concerned about the synchronization process. So I'm going to want to monitor bandwidth that's going to be used for the synchronization process. And I can use tools like the Microsoft Message Analyzer or any third-party speed test tools to measure just how much bandwidth is being consumed when a download and how much throughput is generated when we're synchronizing. Now remember, the sync client is mostly doing file uploads to the cloud, so we want to make sure we measure for that as well. And what I suggest you do is get a pilot group of users and test how much bandwidth is being consumed by that test group of users, and then maybe roll out OneDrive for Business in phases instead of just kind of rolling it out to everybody. And from within the monitoring, if you discover there are some issues, we can control the bandwidth using GPOs or QoS policies, group policy objects, or quality of service policies. And this is done by defining priority of outbound traffic using what's called DSCP, Differentiated Services Code Point. We can create Windows QoS policies that limits the throttling for this outbound traffic, and there are specific group policies for OneDrive for Business. And the easy way to monitor how much activity is being generated by OneDrive for Business users, from within the Office 365 Admin Center, there's a usage report specifically for OneDrive for Business. OneDrive for Business components, we need to be familiar with these as well. Well, storage obviously is one that we need to be aware of. By default, every user gets 1 terabyte. However, we can modify that using a PowerShell command to set that storage amount for a specific user. So if someone slips you 100, you can increase that if you will. We also have device access configuration options, which can be configured based on network location, apps not using modern authentication, and we can use MDM, mobile device management restrictions, for managing and monitoring device access. Files on demand is another OneDrive for Business component. We can specify online only, locally available files, or always available files. However, this must first be enabled, and after doing so, it prevents storage of all files on devices by specifying one of these three options. Online-only files, there's no space required on the local device because everything's cloud-based. Locally available files downloads files to the device. This will allow you to work with those files offline. And then the files on demand, always available files option means the files are always on the device. They're always available even if offline. And you'll see a green circle with a white check mark for always available files versus the local available files option, which only has a check mark icon on your documents. Some additional components we have to be familiar with is we require File Handler 2.0. This is used for customizing file icons, file previews. We can create new proprietary files within the browser. It provides multiple selections, and we can perform custom actions that launch into your app with some code that can make these customizations a little bit more user-friendly and available for our users. And the File Handler 2.0 requires a manifest, which is all the metadata for the interaction between the client and the server, an endpoint, and registration in Azure AD. Now, if we move into client deployment, what clients can actually take advantage of OneDrive for Business? We can deploy to a Mac. Macs use what are called a plist file, or to a Windows machine. If you're using the Azure Active Directory service, we can deploy them using a GPO. We can also use the System Center Configuration Manager, and we can use Intune, which is part of the Office 365 interface. As far as the client synchronization is concerned, we need to download and install the latest OneDrive for Business Sync client, and we also need to specify any synchronization restrictions within the OneDrive for Business Admin Center. And we talked about file types as one type of restriction that we may want to implement from the Admin Center. As I mentioned, this can be configured using PowerShell and the GUI. For PowerShell, we have the verb-spo site. Verb means there are multiple options. For instance, there's a get-spo site, which gets information about the user storage. There's set-spo site, which is used to reset user storage to the default storage amount or to a specific amount. We have the remove-spo site, which permanently deletes that OneDrive for Business site. We also have a set-spo tenant. Then we'll use a parameter-OneDrive storage quota. This will set the default for the OneDrive for Business default storage. We have a get-spo deleted site-identity, and the identity will specify the user that we're working with. We have a restore-spo deleted site if we want to restore a OneDrive site that was deleted for a specific user. And then we can use the set-spo user site, which would be the site that we're trying to access. And this will allow us to assign a site collection administrator to that OneDrive for Business site, which will then allow that user to be able to access that site.